with that title document, in that title document, there's a part of it that is very important for property transactions. I really consider it very important because as a lawyer, when a matter goes to court or when a property deal goes to court, that part really helps the court. And let me explain. But first, it helps. It's referred to as a recital. It's referred to as a recital. Yeah, yes. It's that part of the title document that gives you a background of the land or the property, right? And it helps you to understand how far the property has gone, right? So, for instance, Mr. A bought the land, or the Mr. A, quickly, there are a number of ways that you can become the owner of a property. It's not just by buying. You could become the owner of a property by deforesting and taking possession of the land over a period of time. And that's just one way. You could also become an owner of a property by buying. You could become an owner of a property by inheriting, right? Now, when you look at all of that, you realize that at a point, there's always a trace back to where the whole thing started from. So,
yes, sir.
Also, it's important for you to understand there is a principle in law that in English is translated as you can't give what you don't own, or you can't give what you don't have, right? And that really helps the reciter, because if you are Mr. D and you are the owner of the land, there's a mistake that some or most lawyers make. And that mistake is, after they have taken care of the first part of the document, the next part they go to, which is the reciter, they'll simply say, Mr. Jeff is the beneficial owner of this land. And Mr. Jeff, blah, 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 hereby transfers interest to Mr. Raymond, right? Now, the question you should ask yourself is, how did Mr. Jeff become the owner of that land? Now, that is the importance of the reciter. The reciter tells you that Mr. Jeff inherited this from his father. How did the father become the owner of the land? The father deforested the land. It was a virgin land. The father deforested it, took possession of it over a long period of time, and before his death, he eventually transferred interest to Mr. Jeff, or Mr. Jeff inherited it, right? So it doesn't make sense to just jump at the point where you say Mr. Jeff is the beneficial owner of the land. Now, this is where it's important. It's important at this point because peradventure, there's a dispute on the land. The fact that you have traced that already in the title document, the moment you tender, because really a document by law is meant to speak for itself. So the fact that you have traced that already in the recital helps you in court. Nobody's praying for your land, your land. There is always a peradventure. And really, when I do title documents, I actually look out for that, because peradventure anything happens 20 years time, will the land be able to withstand the storm? And really, that's where it puts your attention back to the fact that the title document is important. If the recital doesn't make sense, if the title document is so vague, certain things are not clear, you look at it, ordinarily when you look at the title document, you should be able to answer certain questions for yourself. So say for instance, I traveled to Ijeomah in Edo State to help a client buy a property. The location was good. After I saw the location, the pricing was not really a problem for me at that point, because I already knew that the location was good. So I asked for the title document. The moment the title documents were brought to me, but it was one specifically, the moment that came to me, I looked at it. A very important page was missing. The reciter was nowhere to be found. The history of the land was not there. Everything was just, I looked at it, I'm like, something is missing. Something very important is missing. And without this, we don't have a deal. The asking price for the land was 4.5 million naira. At that point, if they had given me that land for 2 million naira, I wouldn't take it.
Wow.
To show you the importance, I saw that part of the document. In fact, if they had given me that land for 500,000 naira, I wouldn't take it. Because already it establishes a problem for the person I am trying to invest for. Okay, so we took time, looked out, so we had to sort out that thing before we moved forward. So it's important that you understand some of these things. So if the history of a land is not clear, the reciter doesn't really read. It's important that you ask questions. And sometimes I'll not blame clients, I'll blame some lawyers. They just go straight to the point and just hit the nail on the head. I won't blame clients at that point. But beyond the document, if the person is able to answer certain questions, then you can now tell your lawyer to help you do it properly. Okay, so say for instance, this same land I'm talking about, at the end of the day, it was only a reference to the person buying from. There was no back-end reference. So as a lawyer preparing the document for my client, I had to trace, I went beyond the first document I saw and dig into the history of the land, then I traced it back till it got to my client. So even though the predecessor, the person we are buying from, did not reference that properly, our own document, the title document I prepared for my client, did that for him. Okay, so that helps you understand. So if the history of a land, the reciter is meant to review the history. Now, if the reciter is there but it doesn't explain the history properly, or the reciter is not there but the history is vague, the history doesn't make sense, the owner cannot explain who it bought from, it's a red flag. If certain questions cannot be answered satisfactorily, that is a red flag.